Story 1. I have had a few instances where I invested a significant amount of money into developing a product, only to discover that no one wanted to purchase it. The succinct advice to prevent this is to fall in love with a problem, not a product. Story 2. I don't know if I would call it failure. I leased a bar and ran it successfully for over 5 years. I wasn't making a lot of extra income or having much time off, but I was making a go of it. I nearly doubled sales during that time. The landlord wanted to double the rent and add to the lease that I would have to pay to fix pre-existing underslab plumbing issues costing over $25,000 and roof issues in a flood and storm-prone location. The numbers and liability just did not make sense, so I walked away. It was disappointing, but I am better off working a regular job with a good salary and benefits. Story 3. I have failed 4 times but succeeded 7. Bad partners who were not reliable, dependable, and should not have had access to a checkbook. During a buyout, the owner violated his clause when I suddenly grew a $400,000 per year company to a $5 million per year company. He sued me to get better terms, then drained the accounts. He is in jail now, but he did a good job of ruining his own future out of greed. I did not believe in the product. Spouses are not good business partners. They have unrealistic ideas, and it is difficult to amicably say no to things. Story 4. Our family business failed when I was a teenager. We owned an independent video store, and a Blockbuster opened 2 blocks away. Game over, man, game over. Honestly, if it was not for the fact that we carried adult films, we would have failed long before we did. However, my parents were not really interested in having a purely adult video store due to the reputation. Story 5. My only employee was stealing almost all of the profits. I hired him because I was being stolen from. I sold the business for the cost of the equipment. Story 6. We had a small business that supplied grocery stores with non-food items. Over time, the major chains started doing it directly. The smaller grocery stores did not have the volume, and dollar stores also reduced our sales. We made the decision to gradually shut down. We paid our suppliers and our employees. Story 7. I worked for a man who ran an international education company. His wife took half the company in the divorce, and he lost his passion for it as well. He lost sight of the fact that the product needed improvement. Story 8. Securities and Exchange Board of India. The previous chairperson used to change rules almost every quarter. It was an idea that failed because something legal 3 months ago became illegal 3 months later. Ease of doing business in India is questionable. Story 9. Unreliable or incompetent partners, coupled with undiagnosed bipolar disorder on my part. I realize now that if I start talking about starting a new company, I am absolutely in a manic phase. It does not matter if the business idea is brilliant and will make billions. I can admit now that I am not a person who can handle the responsibility or have good judgment in partners. I will work myself to exhaustion, become increasingly stressed and fatigued until I cannot take it anymore, then completely burn out. Story 10. For my dad, electrical engineer, laid off by General Motors, partners with another laid-off engineer, starts a small engineering firm building test boards. Does well for a few years with small company clients starting to turn a small profit. Partner wants big companies as clients. Partner overspends trying to impress big companies. Partner convinces dad to take out a large loan for more and better equipment. Dad puts up house as collateral. Big companies cancel contracts after missed deadlines. Partner promises completion dates that are not possible. Company folds. Dad loses business, house, and becomes broke. Partner takes a job with John Deere, one of the big clients. Story 11. Had a successful pool cleaning and equipment repair service for many years. I was my own boss and made decent money. It was the literal American dream. Then, I spontaneously collapsed 2 discs in my spine, became fully paralyzed, needed 3 emergency surgeries, and had a multi-level fusion. I was in a wheelchair for 8 months. I can walk a little now but still cannot feel anything below the waist. It is all numb or fiery pain. I lost everything. I liquidated what I could to some friends in the business and sold my trucks. That lasted about 8 months. Then we burned through our savings in about a year. I applied for disability when it happened but was denied twice already. I got a lawyer last year and we are still in the appeals process. I find it unbelievably cruel and heartless for our government to do this to people who need help the most. I have always paid my taxes and never got into trouble. Now I am basically ruined. My marriage is about to end, and I will be homeless soon. Wish me luck because every day is a battle against giving up right now. Story 12. I used to own a small specialty pet store many years ago. We carried reef tanks and supplies in addition to a variety of birds, small animals, and reptiles and did really well for a while. Honestly, big box stores and the internet were our downfall. I could sell the actual pets, but Walmart and Amazon were able to sell tanks, cages, food, and supplies for cheaper than I could get them wholesale. I understand. Who wants to pay more at my shop when they can drive 5 miles or go online and get it much cheaper? I was accused of price gouging by many customers or asked to match Walmart prices. It eventually killed our business and we ended up closing. Story 13. A partner embezzled money from our company to use for his other business. I did not know until a certified public accountant showed me. Story 14. In short, Amazon said that if the goods were damaged in their care, they would take responsibility and reimburse me. Then they did not. Something in my mind snapped like a twig. All the work I put into my business and some random act of God and some random person from Amazon got to undo all of it? Just thinking about it again makes me angry. Story 15. Some people are not cut out to be a business owner or boss. You need persistence, strength, self-motivation, social skills, and honesty. All are necessary to keep a business thriving. Story 16. I'm allergic to milk and got tired of never having good chocolate. So, I developed my own recipe using cashews as a milk powder substitute. It was good, really good, so I tried to start a small chocolate business. It takes time to get everything set up and complete the paperwork. I started in November, and by the time everything was set up, I was looking to make my first sale in March. Now, I am paranoid about the month of March. Terrible things have happened to me in March, so I avoid doing anything major during the whole month. But I decided to put that superstition behind me and make this March the start of something great. It was March of 2020. Story 17. My MBA colleague from Babson College, 2005, told this story. He and 3 friends started an information technology business in California. They lived and worked in a small Southern California beach house. The business took off with normal tensions among the 4. One day, their outsourced payroll company called their house. They said, "Tell X his separate $5,000 check will be a day late." The other 3 confronted X, who said, "Give me a minute." X went into the bedroom with co-founder Y, one of the 4. X came out and admitted, "I have a cocaine problem." He also admitted, "I was skimming. I quit today." Y is now in charge. The company then failed due to financial difficulties and bad morale. Story 18. I invested a bunch of my own money from a credit card in my new business. I had started to take on more clients and was on my way to being in business 7 days a week. Then September 11th happened, and nobody went out to public events for almost a year. I lost all my clients in a few days and was not able to get any new ones. I ended up selling all the gear and going back to a corporate job. Story 19. My dad failed to make money building furniture despite having work booked for at least a year in advance. He was unmedicated bipolar and probably on the autism spectrum. One of his issues was impulse control related to perfectionism. He would make a small mistake and, rather than fixing it in a cost-effective way, would start the whole project over. Sometimes that even meant scrapping expensive lumber. I am nowhere near as talented at woodworking as he was, but I have the ability to say this is good enough and move on when necessary. I also have no problem with repeat builds, which he hated doing. I feel like I could run a woodworking business much better than he did, but watching someone that skilled fail makes me scared to try. Story 20. I'm from a very poor background and only really had one chance to run a business. I saved up, took about 6 years to stash enough money. Then I rented a unit and started my own workshop for fabrication and welding. It made money, but the problem was that I didn't have enough capital to expand or buy more expensive equipment. Then a few things went wrong all at once. I had a quiet period. Then my work van broke down, so we had to hire a van to attend some fairs. After that, a big job was messed up because the galvanizers didn't do a quick dip for a finicky job, and everything ended up warped. It was technically recoverable, but with no capital available, I was left working hard for months with nothing to show for it. Then COVID-19 started, and that was the end of it. I had to shut it down. I won't get another chance, so I'm resigned to a relatively poor life. However, I feel increasingly resentful toward those who get multiple attempts, have the privilege of making mistakes, learning, and trying again. Life lesson: don't be born poor. Story 21. It was not my business, but I was the third employee in a technology startup that a friend of mine founded. He was a brilliant software engineer, but completely out of his element when it came to leadership. More importantly, he underestimated the importance of pleasing the investors who could end the company in an instant by withdrawing their funding, which is what happened. Story 22. I had one failure due to not having a defined division of labor agreement with the partner. Once the agreement was finalized, it was clear that their idea of the labor division was, I put in half the money, but you do all the work and I get half the profits. Fortunately, it was going to be more of a side project for us, but I did learn a $20,000 lesson. Story 23. Not a business owner. Auditor and accountant. Common themes: addiction of any sort, drugs, gambling, gaming. After that, it is just different combinations of who in the business has the addiction and what type. Story 24. The specialization that made my services valuable also made them vulnerable. The majority of my work was with coal power plants. A sudden political shift led to the immediate withholding of all discretionary funds. I had over $200,000 in work canceled in one season. Preventative maintenance is less of a priority when you are sunsetting a system. I spent a year without substantive work. A business with a low level of diversification may be more profitable but may not weather the boom and bust cycles of the economy. Businesses where diversification is possible tend to be in low-margin, highly competitive spaces. Story 25. Poor money management, lack of discipline, a change of government in a politically focused city, and a non-essential industry. Doomed. Story 26. Going too big too quickly. Growth costs money. You still have to pay taxes on money you have reinvested in the business. Story 27. I was the technical co-founder of a semi-profitable software as a service product that involved text message marketing. We were not doing anything unethical. It involved user opt-in. I built the entire platform, including the web application and mobile application, while my co-founder handled marketing and sales. We were doing quite well. I had not quit my day job, but the product was generating a decent amount of money, and I was considering switching to it full-time. Fortunately, I did not quit my job because shortly after, Federal Trade Commission laws changed, making our application essentially illegal. Making it compliant with the new laws would have required making the product much more frustrating to use. I decided to play World of Warcraft instead of working on this in my free time. Story 28. My mother had a business that failed. Employees were stealing from her. Even a small amount of theft can cause a food business with thin profit margins to close. Story 29. First time, too many partners and no one could agree on anything. Second time, not enough money to keep it financed until the profits were steady. We sold it at a minor loss, and the person who bought it is making money now. I have been successful with the other three I have done so far. Story 30. My father did in the end. My grandmother started a business in the 1950s and was very successful. My father took it over in the 1980s and expanded it a lot. Things went well for a little while, but he expanded too quickly and was too much of a pushover as a boss, so he never got rid of staff that he should have. Then the internet came along, and the industry he was in started to change. He, like many others, refused to believe the shift was real, so he failed to embrace it. As companies started to falter, a few big companies began buying up smaller ones. His was too big to buy out, but too small to compete with the new giant companies. In the early 2000s, the company went bankrupt. He tried to restart variations of it a few times, but none of them lasted very long. It was always a combination of bad management on his part and just not being able to compete with the big names. Story 31. Former auto repair shop owner here. It was a small two-bay shop in the heart of the city, in a rough part of town. Business went fine for a couple of years. I was busy making money. The local walk-in customers were frustrating and often wasted time. Many people expect a mechanic to work for free on their very old, poorly maintained cars. The landlord raised the rent significantly after my initial lease ended, even though the plumbing and heating systems in the building were not working. I was stressed. I looked for a new location but could not find anything affordable. I spent 6 months searching and tried to buy property, but it was not successful. I closed the business on December 22nd, 2017. It was the happiest day of my life. I closed it because my mental health was declining, which would have affected my physical health as well. Stress is serious. Story 32. Untrustworthy partners will harm you regardless of your skill or success. I learned that the hard way. Story 33. My first real business in 2010 and 2011 was when I bought out a competing business at age 20 while managing a computer repair business. From the business side, there were 4 key lessons. First, I honestly did not know enough about due diligence. The owner of the store I worked at wanted to buy out a competing friend's business. I should have remembered that my business partner was really bad at business. His repair store was supported by military retirement income and was basically a hobby project to make him feel important. Without military retirement income, the store would have closed years ago since actual profit was below $30,000 for many years. It turned out his friend's competing shop was basically the same. They charged customers an even lower hourly rate, which caused me to lose customers when I raised my rates, even though repairs were completed in significantly fewer hours. This leads to the second lesson, which is consumer psychology, also known as sales. I knew computers inside and out and could explain why a customer would want one option over another. At the time, that was my idea of sales. Real sales, however, is putting yourself in the customer's shoes and mindset and using that to show why your recommendation appeals to their core values. In retrospect, I should have at least created internal marketing emphasizing streamlined processes that got computers back to customers faster while maintaining the same or lower final cost. The third lesson was advertising, customer growth, and marketing. Ironically, my dad is a professional ad writer who became a creative director at a large advertising firm in Portland that was bought by a global conglomerate. So I thought I knew advertising. However, advertising is more than writing effective ads. It involves getting the ads to the right audience. I had almost no budget for real ads, and what I did spend was only targeted by proximity. Digital ads were still somewhat new for small businesses, but I should have used those alongside word-of-mouth campaigns with existing customers and traditional targeted marketing. The fourth lesson was brand identity. I did not have one. Why would customers choose me over another shop? The only reasons were because I was closer or known for good work. Unlike the shop I managed, where customers specifically requested me, my new clientele did not know me. They did not know I was one of the best technicians in a 20-mile area. I lacked prepared scripts or skills to diplomatically explain why customers should choose my shop if another shop's price per hour was lower and only a 5-minute extra drive. Beyond business factors, there was also a market shift. In 2010, people were starting to switch to phones as their primary computing devices. Many computers had become cheap because they were poorly made, so people often chose to buy a new computer for about $300 rather than repair one for $180. Computers remained a necessity, especially laptops for mobility, but phones increasingly replaced desktops and laptops for many tasks. For example, my stepmother used to play Bejeweled Blitz on her laptop while watching shows. Now she uses her phone for that. A friend of mine has a MacBook Pro that I use more than she does because I need to remote log into my computers or mirror shows to her TV. She barely uses the MacBook, relying mainly on her iPhone. Online retail was also changing how people purchased items, including custom-built PCs. I could see this market pivot coming and knew the computer repair store market was going to decline, which it did. After a year of struggling, I decided to shut down the storefront rather than invest effort in growing a store in a shrinking market. With what I know now, I probably could have made it work, though it would not have been multimillionaire success, just comfortable six-figure success. The final challenge for me was mental health. Although I knew it was not great, I did not realize how severe my issues were. I bought a shop as a solo operator, and I was also working solo. I did not have contingency plans, so when my mental health deteriorated to the point where I could barely get out of bed, the business suffered greatly. I was not open or honest about my mental health due to shame and stigma, which, combined with pride, stopped me from building the necessary contingencies I could have had if I had been honest. I bought that shop when I was 20. I have definitely learned a lot since then. Looking back, I see many things I could have done better. Even in later business ventures, I have made mistakes and continue to learn constantly. Story 34. Worked with people who loved the idea of running a company instead of the work of actually running one. When things got hard, they deflected accountability. It was always someone else's fault, never their own. Story 35. The smartphone taking over tasks people used to do on home computers was something my computer repair business could not overcome. Windows 8 was also a blow, as it made users give up on computers. Story 36. When I was younger, I noticed that people in Colorado rarely washed their cars. They often preferred machine wash stations, which have largely replaced hand wash services. Story 37. Made the mistake of thinking that critical acclaim and good game design would lead to a product the public would want. Got some highly rated award nominations, but no meaningful sales numbers. When the realization dawned that art and business rarely mix well and concessions drained our motivation, we called it quits. Story 38. This is not quite a business, but it is an incredible story. I am a minister. In 2013, I met some people at a church that had potential and needed help. They were in a liberal denomination, officially supportive of LGBTQ rights since 1985, located in a growing suburban area with a solid building, but they only had 25 members. The previous pastor ran group homes for cognitively impaired people, had stolen from them, and was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. One of the 25 members was a multimillionaire and agreed to contribute about $100,000 a year for 3 years to see if we could turn it around. I was fully committed. In the first 2 months, I discovered that the church was not down to 25 members because of the pastor's prison sentence. These 25 were the people who did not understand why everyone else turned their backs on the pastor. In the 3rd month, it turned out that the multimillionaire did not actually have any money. He was later banned from running businesses by the Securities and Exchange Commission. He went from seeking capital to running a Ponzi scheme in gradual steps. In the 4th month, the church voted to take out a mortgage to keep the church going for 3 years. The vote failed 12-11. Several of the 12 wanted to change their votes after realizing they had ended their church, but I did not allow a revote. The church closed and paid out the severance in my contract. I have not been in full-time ministry since then, but I am still a minister. Story 39. Got addicted to creating the business, not the cash flow. Spent all kinds of money on logo design, trademark registration, skills development, business accounts, licenses, legal fees, and more, all before making even $1. Ended up getting so hooked on the creative process that I completely missed the point of creating a business, which is to make money. This is why failing fast, target audience and niche selection, and market validation are so important. If you are like me at that point in my life, you have your idea of what a business is, and then you have what a business actually is. If you are not serious about making money, do not start. You will not stay afloat, and you will end up with debt and potentially a habit of failing. That is not to say that money is the only important thing, but it is important if you want to succeed in business. Story 40. I've had a handful of failures as well. For me, it came down to lack of experience, poor business partners, inconsistency. Story 41. I prioritized friendships over the health of the business. Business relationships and social relationships often conflict. Story 42. Tried to wear all the hats. I was not able to balance the time required to do the work I had with the effort required to get new work. I am much happier working for someone who gives me work to do and lets me focus on it. If I tried again, I would want someone else to handle finding new clients and managing the billing. I will just do the work. Story 43. My first business failed because my partner became an alcoholic. I enjoyed drinking and was in the pub almost every Friday and Saturday night. My drinking was discussed before we started the business and whether it would affect my work. It was never an issue for my partner, as he rarely drank. I assured him that I was very experienced and good at what I did, and that alcohol would not be a problem. Eventually, the business required us to be alert on weekends. I gave up drinking, never started again, and remain teetotal today. He started drinking more during his downtime, and it began to affect his work. Today, he is a moderately functioning alcoholic. It was a shame as he had tremendous potential. Story 44. I had a small video production company producing difficult shots, mostly in the air. It was always an uphill battle with customers saying the pricing was absurd and that all the health and safety regulations were not needed. They were always stubborn and thought they could do it themselves, not realizing there are huge legal implications when filming commercially at height. Story 45. When I was 20, I dropped out of college to start a business with two friends. We made electronic test units that a student could use to simulate electrical circuits. We sold these units to schools and prisons. We started hiring too many employees and lost our prison contracts, which led to bankruptcy. As a co-owner, I ended up with many creditors pursuing me. I did not have the $1.5 million they demanded. Those were difficult times. Story 46. Not exactly a failure, but a very expensive lesson. I started a business with seasonal retail sales, but a year-round lease at a mall from 2008 to 2012. Mall rents were high and staffing expenses were much higher. 2 to 5 employees covering mall hours 7 days a week add up quickly. I worked 60 hours a week for the business to break even, so I lived off savings until the business became profitable. Spoiler alert, it never happened. I held a huge going out of business sale at the end of my lease to get rid of inventory and fixtures. Basically, I vastly underestimated expenses, overestimated demand, and harmed my finances for decades because I withdrew money from my retirement account for business startup costs. Now I get business loans because if my business plan is not good enough for loans, then it is not good enough to pursue. Never use 100% of your own money. Never cash out retirement accounts for anything other than a life or death emergency. Story 47. A friend had a husband who was a professional supporter of former President Donald Trump but was the most Hispanic person ever, and people stopped returning to the business. It only lasted 2 years. Story 48. Not enough people in the core team share the same vision and passion. Also, wearing multiple hats went wrong. You need to leave tasks to experts after a point. Excessive costs on human resources and software led to declining business. Another lesson learned is never to spend money you don't have. Start with whatever you have and take loans or credit to expand when there is solid income and margins. Do not start a business with debt. But that is just my experience. Story 49. In 2007, just as we were finally profitable, Wall Street investors crashed the economy. My co-founder, who was my partner at the time and the primary producer, lost confidence. Instead of doing everything she could to persevere, she got a job and allowed the business to wither. By the time the economy began to recover, she had become more interested in something else and did not want to pursue the business further. Story 50. Bad business partner. He was very well off but refused to listen to any advice or feedback. He burned bridges with lawyers and accountants, refused to set up a marketing budget, and thought he was always in the right. While he was in debt over $10,000 with retainer fees, he still spent money on parties, strip clubs, and even a fish tank. That should tell you a lot about his priorities. Story 51. My first business website failed because I lost interest in my portion of it. We had other issues like hosting images and video before YouTube existed, but realistically we could have continued. My second business website failed because we were poor at market research. We had a problem to solve and a niche. I built the website and my partner handled sales. 2 months after launch, we discovered an existing company that we had completely missed. They already filled the niche, had over 30 employees, and were venture capital backed. After that, I did a lot of freelancing. I do not consider that a failure because I made money. However, I got tired of doing that because it was a lot of work. I took a day job doing the same work for about 3 to 4 times what I was making. I am starting my third business right now, woodworking. I will have my workbench finished next week. After one final test run to fine-tune my tools, I should have some work for sale by mid-July. I have spoken to a couple of people willing to give me shelf space around town. Hopefully, this works out. Story 52:08 happened for me. Held on though until 2011 at least, barely. I built up about 40% of my company's revenue from corporate contracts as opposed to business to consumer on the front end. It was incredibly lucrative. That all came to a screeching halt. Never fully recovered. It was a wild ride. Story 53. I found a niche. I worked on my product until a better-funded competitor took my idea and executed it much better. I did have fun and learned a lot, but trying to get everything was objectively worse than accepting venture capital. Story 54. I ran a computer repair service and was threatened by a local insurance adjuster. He said that if I didn't charge for my repair estimates, which was my whole gimmick as I didn't want to charge just to tell you the repair cost, he would do me dirty with the Chamber of Commerce. He sent someone my way who was obviously testing me to lie about a repair. I didn't fall for it and gave an honest assessment. I later found out he wanted me to bill for the estimates so he could raise the rates on his customers as a claim. Once I realized the liability I would be under, it was easier to just work for someone else. Story 55. Never split ownership equally. It became a challenge for me to motivate my partner as much as possible while avoiding working significantly more than him, so I would not feel like he was benefiting from my hard work without contributing. One person should always have the final decision. Story 56. Slightly different aspect to the question, but I was one of 3 directors in a United Kingdom company. I was always the one doing the manual side, meeting clients, working with the teams, and so on. I found out my 2 other directors were scamming me, the company, and Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. They were falsifying expense claims, booking personal holidays, and generally taking at least 2 to 3 times what I was. I investigated them on my own time, copying expense claims, downloading bank statements, and so forth for 3 weeks when they must have guessed what I was doing. They both voted me out for unprofessional attitude. I accepted it while negotiating with my very professional legal team. I managed to report them to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs online many times. However, I still have not found out if they are being investigated. I now know they have lost their biggest clients recently and will probably go insolvent soon. Story 57. My ex lost his business due to a lack of integrity. He gave people he liked exceptionally good deals for his services, trying to impress them. To make up for the shortfall, he overcharged elderly customers. He gained a bad reputation and lost all his business. He was also extremely lazy and did subpar work for those elderly customers. Story 58. I had a sports shop in the United Kingdom 12 years ago. Sales were always decent. The first major problem was the local council massively increasing the rates, which are taxes on business properties in the United Kingdom. With one increase, they effectively caused about 1 in 5 small businesses in the town to close within a year. However, the biggest factor in my failure was shoplifting. I probably would have made a profit every week, and definitely every month, if it had not been for theft. Story 59. The product cost too much to produce. We could not reduce the cost of production. The only way to increase market penetration was to lower the retail price, which was impossible. Story 60. My partner and old friend had all the front-of-house skills, and I handled most of the back. The business was successful due to his social skills and being in the housing industry during the run-up to the Great Recession, when almost anyone could guarantee success in the industry. I learned many valuable things and made some great moves, but I also realized my friend was bipolar. He would disappear for long periods, and no one could reach him. During those times, I had to take over the other parts, which I hated. When he was present and in a manic phase, everyone loved him because he was the most charming, warm person around and had no problem spending his and the company's money on all sorts of debauchery, which contractors generally appreciate. I, on the other hand, disliked almost every part of that. I began to resent and almost hate him for putting me in that position. Eventually, I started looking elsewhere, found a good offer in the corporate world, and left. It was the right move for me. He later sold the company to a nationwide chain and did quite well for himself a few years after I left. Story 61. We were very close to securing major venture capital for our great product after 1.5 years of intense effort. We delivered an impressive demonstration to a room full of chief executive officers from potential customer companies. A meeting was scheduled for September 12th in New York, with all our intellectual property prepared for review and submission. Fortunately, no one attended the meeting the day before. However, everything was postponed, and the company ran out of payroll funds a month later. Story 62. It is really hard to run a strictly in-person business like an escape room when a growing pandemic prompts the state to force non-essential businesses to shut down. Not that it mattered much anyway. Sales were already dropping significantly a few weeks before lockdown. It is unclear how much of that was people rightfully being cautious about gatherings in confined places and how much was just sales naturally declining, but probably a good portion was the former. By the time lockdowns were lifted, we had already closed down operations and were not looking to start again. It would have cost too much. Story 63. Not me, but my father. He started businesses, paid the fees, acquired the equipment, then did not do any work until they fell apart. Story 64. I was going through a divorce that emotionally affected me deeply. This happened at the same time as the coronavirus pandemic and the business essentially running out of money because of it. I could have found a way to push through and make it work, but I was honestly so incredibly depressed, with suicidal thoughts consistently on my mind. My priority became simply surviving. I can always build another business, but only if I am here. Story 65. I thought I had a good idea. I talked to someone I thought would buy the product. They told me I was being foolish. I asked why. We had a great conversation where I understood their actual problems. I spoke with more people they introduced me to and confirmed they all had very similar problems. I built a solution and received a lot of feedback that it was not good. I asked why. I got great feedback and tried again. I repeated this last part until I retired. Story 66. It was impossible to find commercial vehicle insurance for a bus driven by two 23-year-olds, even with existing commercial driver's licenses. Additionally, we could not generate enough interest to proceed, even if we had found insurance. Story 67. Similar to what others have mentioned, my family owned a hair salon franchise. It did well in the strip mall. Then 2 of the stores were converted into small restaurants, and suddenly there was no parking with everyone circling. Business declined. The landlord kept raising the rent, and it took every cent to pay expenses like salary, rent, and franchise fees. After several hard years of being drained, the business closed. If I ever start a business, I swear I will own the storefront. It requires a larger loan up front, but there is an end date on the mortgage. Just like with housing, you never get ahead with a landlord increasing rent every year. Story 68. Cannabis became legal, cheap, and too costly to cultivate and brand. It was a good and long run, but I wasn't able to transition effectively. At least I was able to sell my license application before the city in question changed its mind on regulations. I didn't go completely broke following the wild goose chase disguised as legal steps the state designed, only to allocate all licenses to large corporations. It was very successful at one point. The business model failed because I wasn't able to focus on adapting and transitioning. Frankly, I was going through some family difficulties and let it get away from me. At least my family is together, but training for new careers after 50 is no good. Story 69. My first business failed because I was too young and disorganized, and I did not have my business identity sorted out. It became so overwhelming to operate that I had to give it up. About a year ago, I decided to try again after being fed up with my 9-to-5 job. I have had much more success after learning how to do things the proper way. Story 70. I was a slave to my customers. I once heard a person say, "Service, not servitude." I also did not have a good handle on the bookkeeping. I was wearing too many hats. Story 71. The state decided to have more control and increase tax revenue, so they limited business licenses using a lottery. My name was never called, and my license expired with no way to renew. It is shuttered. Story 72. Business 1 came up with a product, developed it, and went to market. People loved it, and we sold a few $1 million worth. A large private equity-owned company in the space accused us of patent infringement, although our patent was not even close. They drained us in court, and we could no longer afford to fight, so we signed a royalty deal with them. That product eventually petered out, and we shelved it. Business 2 involved buying a small business from people who wanted to retire. We ran it for a couple of years and developed new products that we had agreed to sell to the mass market. Before the first big purchase order for the new product, the COVID-19 pandemic happened. We sold the pre-existing company to someone else but kept the new product. After COVID-19, we could not gain traction and shelved it. Business 3 used technology from the last business to develop something else in a different industry. So far, so good. Story 73. I ran a successful marketing company. Much of my business came through a podcast I hosted and working with co-working spaces. I decided to open my own co-working space. I found a local office that was willing to work with me. I invested a lot of money, built out the space, and set an opening day of March 16, 2020. I lost half my agency clients in the first few weeks. Most of the remaining ones stopped paying, and by the middle of 2021, my company was on life support. Life is not fair. I struggled for a while, but I went back to school. Maybe one day I will try again, but for now, it is someone else's problem. Story 74. Started without a customer base planned ahead for the year. I needed to keep working 2 jobs until I was better at business development. Story 75. Not me, but my parents. First, it was getting tricked by so-called friends and siblings, blowing money on hookers and alcohol, living the life, having more expenses than profit. Then later on, it was not keeping up with the modern world. You cannot expect to do the same thing after 40 years and expect the world to be the same. Story 76. Technically, mine did not fail. I just stopped doing it. I used to print t-shirts for organizations in college. I could do it cheaper than anyone else in the area and sold a lot of shirts. When I graduated, I stopped doing it because I could make much more in my career. Story 77. Not having an exit plan. Should have sold it near peak revenue, but ultimately revenue continued to decline, and I eventually sold it for the debt owed. Story 78. No real technology co-founder. Low vision investors who were not from the industry, poor hires at the time to scale up, became tired and low energy. Story 79. Well, I didn't fail, but I probably know the reason. 1. Maybe they chose the wrong path from the very beginning, or their marketing and finance skills are not so good. 2. They couldn't find the team for the real-world workflow. 3. Maybe they didn't check the market response before launching the product. 4. Some people may not agree with this, but I guess even if you did everything perfectly, your luck or fate has different plans. I am also pursuing business, so I can guess what may happen. If I said something offensive, please don't get me wrong. Story 80. Family business. Dad expected mom to do 99% of all the paperwork, hiring, staff management, cleaning a massive building that could have used a full-time janitor, and scheduling in addition to raising 4 kids. His job was to be the star coach who brought everyone in and mingled with all the young mothers. This arrangement worked like a charm for about 15 years. Then mom decided she wanted a life and told him to hire a secretary because she was only going to work 40 hours a week. It took her about a year to realize she was being manipulated. Then another year for the divorce. The business lasted maybe another 6 months after that. He lost everything and is basically homeless now, while she is finally with a man who sees what a gem she is and runs her own very successful business. Story 81. Built a great product that nobody actually wanted to pay for and spent 8 months perfecting features instead of talking to customers. Had hundreds of people say this is so cool, but when it came time to swipe their card, crickets. Turns out cool and I will pay monthly for this are completely different things. Story 82. To me, the first companies that come to mind which failed significantly in business are Pfizer and Monsanto. Story 83. Found out too late that the business partner was telling potential buyers after sales meetings that the product was not ready, so he could attend startup conferences and brag about being a small startup chief executive officer. He also gave in-depth detailed specifications and designs with presentations to our competitors to brag about how good they were. We found out when we visited a competitor's website after they announced a number of new features, and they were my designs. Story 84. It was a three-way partnership where two of the partners conspired to deceive the third, who trusted the two more than they deserved. Story 85. It was not just one thing. Often, several events occur that set you back financially, and when there are financial pressures, it leads to poor decision-making. At least that is what happened in my case. Story 86. I failed in my business once. Not because I did not work hard, I gave it everything. But I was too attached to the outcome. Looking back, that failure shaped me far more than success ever could. Every effort builds something in you: discipline, perspective, resilience. Nothing truly goes to waste. Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Now, I focus on doing my best, learning from mistakes, and showing up with consistency. That mindset shift changed everything. Story 87. Not me, but my dad. He is extremely skilled at getting a business off the ground and making it successful. Unfortunately, he cannot get past that stage. The transition point where he needs other people in management positions always challenges him. He just cannot trust others with that much responsibility. Naturally, he becomes overextended trying to handle the finances, daily schedules, marketing, daily work, hiring process, and more. He has run 3 very successful businesses into the ground this way. By into the ground, I mean he racked up huge debts and sold the businesses to recoup those debts. The people who bought them have turned them all into very successful enterprises. If he had sold them sooner or been able to hand off some management responsibilities, he would have been wildly wealthy by now. Instead, he is doing okay, while 3 of his companies are local mainstays and no longer bear his name. Story 88. Too much of a time sink at exactly the wrong time. I am doing much better this time because I can devote myself to it. Middle age does not have a lot going on besides making money. There are almost no distractions, so I can put in the time to make my margins profitable. Story 89. Donald Trump and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency deported my workers. I lost everything. I made a mistake voting for him. Nobody is stepping up to take the jobs that were left vacant. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.